Well, it's time now for perspective. Black and Asian non-nationals are routinely the victims of xenophobic violence and social and economic exclusion in South Africa. That's the damning conclusion of a new report from Human Rights Watch that says a government plan to tackle the problem launched last year is bearing precious little fruit. My guest today is Jean Misago, senior researcher at the African Centre for Migration and Society at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here on France 24. Now, could you please start by giving us an idea of the sorts of discrimination that Black and Asian non-South Africans have been facing in the country in recent years?
I mean, xenophobia in its different forms of manifestation has been a long feature in South Africa, democratic South Africa, since 1994. Foreign nationals, particularly from Africa and Asia, face discrimination in the hands of government, but also in the hands of the public. That discrimination often manifests in public violence that destroys, kills, and displaces many from the communities in which they live. So what the Human Rights Report shows is what we've been documenting over the years through our research. So it's been happening for a long time.
Now, you mentioned it just then, this isn't just members of the public perpetrating violence against foreigners. You say it's also government agencies, the judiciary, that are guilty of discriminating against foreigners.
Yes, there is also institutional xenophobia, where government agencies like the police, crime intelligence are accused of harassment, unlawful detention, or arrest or deportations without really providing legal justifications. There's also some kind of extortion, selective enforcement of laws, which pointed to the general perspective in the country that foreign nationals' rights are not do not deserve equal protection.
Now, last year, the South African government did introduce the National Action Plan to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and related intolerance. Has that made any difference yet to the people it's intended to help?
No, it hasn't, because as we speak, violence continues. A few weeks ago, we had violence in many areas in Johannesburg. And in 2020, even during the lockdown, we have been able to document more than 3 incidents of the violence. So despite all those documents and laws and national plan, there is really no concrete measures on the ground that is being implemented. And that speaks to the general lack of political will on the part of the government to tackle the issue. So the government has been characterized by denial, that it's not xenophobia, just crime, and that has led to no concrete national level response. And that leads to impunity, where perpetrators are not held accountable by the justice system, and it leaves migrants in the country's lives and livelihoods in danger, because there is no one to go to, there's no recourse, and the violence continues.
So you said there's no political will to change the situation. How do you go about changing that?
I think that's where institutions such as civil society organizations, UN, and other national organizations such as South African Human Rights Commission can really play a role to hold government accountable when it fails to perform its duties to protect the country's residents. But we have seen such institutions making recommendations like the ones made by Human Rights Watch, and the recommendations are ignored and nothing follows. I think the institutions have to be consistent, keep pressure on the government to make sure the rights of everybody are implemented. if the government doesn't want to do that, there could be something around finding ways of holding perpetrators accountable, even if not relying on government to do so because they haven't shown any enthusiasm in that regard.
Now, there will be some people who say that all countries experience an element of xenophobia, of this sort of violence. How would you say South Africa compares to its neighbours?
Indeed, xenophobia is not unique to South Africa. It's a global phenomenon. In the region, you have xenophobia in other African countries, Botswana, Nigeria, and Namibia, and the other countries. But what is unique to South Africa is really the scale, the regularity with which violence takes place, and the atrocity it shows. I mean, burning people alive, burning their properties, and chasing them thousands away from communities. Like some people are saying, we are cleansing our communities. It's really that atrocity is what makes South Africa's xenophobia unique. But other than that, xenophobia is not in South Africa. We have it in rich and poor countries, in the global south and the global north. But that kind of the violent manifestation seems to be unique to South Africa at the moment.
And what, in your opinion, are the root causes of this discrimination? Is it a simple case of those in power scapegoating the most vulnerable in society, or is there more to it than that?
There are a number of causes or causal factors that can be grouped in many categories, but two categories come to the fore. The first one is, of course, underlying conditions, which are material deprivation, unemployment, poverty, but those alone cannot explain the violence. So this political scapegoating links those material forms of deprivation to the presence of foreign nationals. So many South Africans really feel that they don't what they deserve because of the presence of foreign nationals, and that is due to political scapegoating when leaders are not able to deliver services, and then they blame their failures on foreign nationals. But those material conditions are common to almost everybody in the country, so they do not help us explain the violence, why violence happens in certain communities and not in others. So our research is able to document more proximate causes of the violence where it happens. And those include the two factors: governance or community leadership, which is not able to uphold the rule of law, and which is not able to provide trusted conflict resolution mechanisms. So we see violence where that kind of governance is not available. The second factor is mobilization by local groups and individuals who use violence to benefit their political and economic interest. So those who wanted to address the violence, they have to look at those more proximate causes that differentiate affected areas and unaffected areas, and those can be tackled through accountability and good governance.
Jean Misago, we're going to have to leave it there. Jean Misago, Senior Researcher at the African Centre for Migration and Society at the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here on France 24.
Thank you.